G'day folks, I'm Jax, this is J&D Creations, and today we're going to try an end grain cutting board. Now, I've only made one. You do realise that after like nearly 80 videos, you've never introduced yourself before. So, good that you finally did it. Alright, see ya. So, up until this point, I've only made one of these before, and that was a prototype, because I'd never made one before, and I wanted to see how it would go. And this one we're going to make today is for a very good friend of mine. I have done one step in the process that I did before I decided to film this venture. All I've done is glue these panels together. This is 2 pieces of Victorian ash. Later down the track, I'm going to need to resaw these and then glue them together again. And this panel as well, but it's the same thing as the other panel. So we've got 2 panels of 2 pieces of Victorian ash. Other than that, I've done nothing, so come along for this journey and hopefully we can create something cool. so at this point, we've got the first glue up underway now. Well, the second glue up, but the first one that you guys have seen. But I realized that that whole process that we just went through could be a little bit daunting if you're wanting to try this out for yourself and you've never done it before. And the reason I know this is because when I tackled the prototype, I had the same damn thoughts going through my head. What the hell do I do? So you may have noticed there were some excess pieces, and that's because from all the glue ups and the wood that I had, I'm planning on making 2 boards. I haven't glued the second board up because I don't have enough big clamps. So I'm gonna use those boards now. We're gonna have a look at them and I'm gonna run you a bit more in depth through the process. So let's go and do that. All right, so we're making an end grain cutting board here, which means you're not gonna see any of this face grain or side grain. We're gonna be using this side here as the top of the board that we're gonna cut on. That's why things can be a bit tricky, because you need to visualize these patterns from the end. Now the cutting boards I'm making are gonna be a brickwork pattern. So each of these jarrah pieces is going to represent 1 brick. So I cut these to size. They're about 30 mil thick by about 63 wide. Now the Victorian ash that we milled up is going to represent the mortar in the brickwork pattern. So I've got that down to about 4 mil thick, and these pieces get laid in between our brick surfaces. Just like that. So if you can see along the face there, we've got a number of bricks here that have a mortar layer in between them. So once this panel's glued together, I can then make cross cuts at the thickness I want the final chopping board to be, rotate these on end, and we're going to be left with this pattern on top. Now the glue up that I did before I started filming is going to be the layer of mortar that runs between each layer of brick along the top here. Now because this is an end grain board, we need to make sure that that layer of mortar is also end grain. Hence the reason we're going to be gluing all those panels side by side so that we get a long strip of end grain. Now when I was working on these mortar panels, I milled them down to 4 mil thick, which is going to represent the distance between each brick, and then I cut them on the table saw to just over 30 mil. And that is so when I put them in here, they stand a little bit flush so I can clean them all up after the glue up's done. End grain chopping boards take a lot of gluing and cutting and gluing and cutting to get a nice intricate pattern. So you just got to hope with each stage that you keep everything lined up beautifully and that your end result is what you're after, really. Now there is also a huge debate, conversation, whatever you want to call it, on the topic of whether end grain is better than face grain boards and side grain and all the different kinds of grain. I'm not educated enough to tell you, yes, one is definitely better than the other, but what I can do is demonstrate to you the different aspects of each angle so that you can make a decision yourself. I'm going to use these offcuts of Victorian ash to tell you what I'm talking about. So let's imagine this is a solid piece of wood, just like this, for example. For just about every other aspect of woodworking, people tend to use these faces and sides here because they contain the most grain detail. But when you break wood down, what you actually find is the fibers, which are represented by these pieces of ash here, run along the grain. So if we make a chopping board in this orientation, we're cutting our food, whatever you're cutting on it, in this orientation, you're gonna be cutting across the fibers of the wood, which is fine. You just end up with some more scratch marks and it's harsh on your knife. But when we make end grain cutting boards, as you can see here, the wood grain runs up and is very fibrous at the top. Now obviously this is extremely exaggerated, but when you take your knife, it can slip through the fibers. Therefore, it's a lot nicer on the blade of your knife. And when your knife penetrates, it will separate those fibers. And when you remove the knife, those fibers will close up again. What this translates to is that you'll be left with a lot less cut marks on your chopping board. You may even see end grain boards marketed as self-healing. And that's because of this. When you cut in, it opens the fibers up. When you remove the knife, those fibers close up again, self-healing. Just something to think about if you are going to make a chopping board yourself. But again, I'm not your dad. I can't tell you what to do. You do whatever you want to do. So while we're waiting for this first glue up to dry, I'm going to take the Victorian ash that I glued together. We're going to resaw it on the bandsaw, mill it down to size, and then glue it up again. So we've got a nice big strip of end grain to use once we cross-cut that glue up that you saw to do our next glue up. I'm just going to stop now. Let's get into it. So, I just had the blade pinch on my bandsaw. Not sure what the footage looked like, but I'll try and slow it down so you can see it. But the whole blade jumped off the tires and it's actually even cut into one of the protective guards on the bandsaw. So be careful when you're using this machinery. Let me show you what's happened. So you can see there, it's actually cut into the door. The whole blade's popped right off. It's come right out under there. Doesn't look like it's done any damage to the insert, but we'll have to assess that if we can get this board out. So even though this blade is still quite sharp, you can see it's got some serious kinks in it there. There's another one there. And to be honest, I've had one mishap with this blade before and thought it recovered fairly well. But with that kink in it, I don't know if I should be using it anymore or not. It is still sharp though. So if you guys know much about bandsaws, like more than me, which is probably most people, leave me a comment down below. Tell me if this blade is still safe to use. Because when you tension it, I assume that the tires would pull this out anyway and pull that kink out, but I'm not sure. So if you know the answer, leave me a comment down below. Tell me whether I throw this away, get a new one, or whether I can keep using it. But for now, I'm gonna throw another blade on. I don't have another resaw blade. I'm just gonna have to make do with the ones I do have. The setup when you change the blade. Well, that was just a bloody nightmare. It's probably the worst resawing I've ever done, and it's probably the piece I needed the most accuracy on. Oh well, that's what happens, I guess. It was the wrong blade. There were far too many teeth on it. It was just tracking, and it just tracked right out of the board. So we're gonna see if I can hopefully salvage some of the pieces I've got left and use them. Fingers crossed. So up until this point, if you haven't been able to visualize a brickwork pattern, now's the chance for you to see what I'm talking about, because we're about to do the final glue up. So I am curious if anyone realized during the glue up that we did all of the bricks at 63 wide, but then we had one at the end that was half the size. In my prototype, I didn't do the half size one on the end. So when I had to offset all the pieces to make the brickwork line up, as brickwork does, I ended up with these hanging off the edge. So it made it really difficult to line the brickwork pattern up precisely, and there was just a lot of waste. So by putting that half brick at the end of the glue up, it allows you to rotate every second line so that you can offset your brickwork pattern evenly, but your edges are still relatively square. So there's a handy tip that I learned from prototyping first.
Years later.
So, as John Malecki would say, it's time for just the tip. Actually, no, that's probably copyrighted, so let's forget I said that. John, please don't sue me. But, quick little handy tip for you guys. So you just saw me route the juice groove in that board. Ordinarily, you just use a rounded cove bit to get your perfect shaped juice groove. But what can often happen with the cove bit is you're removing an awful lot of material in one go, so it's quite easy to get burning. In order to avoid that burning, start out with a V-groove bit. This bit will remove most of the material for you. Then you can go back over it with your cove bit. Don't get any burning, you get a nice clean finish, and it's just all round easier. You could even do your juice groove just with the V-groove bit if you want to get fancy. So that wasn't just the tip, but it's a helpful tip to hopefully make this process easier for you. Again, John Malecki, if you're watching this, thanks for checking out my videos, but please don't sue me. We are finally at my favorite part of a project. Let's brand this thing and then dump some oil on it. And there will be no more flame throwing in my videos because I got a brand new branding iron. So let's check it out, get this brand on, and get this board finished. that oiling, this chopping board is finally done. Now it is still soaking in that tub, and I'm gonna leave it in there for probably about 20 minutes, just so that jarrah can really soak up as much oil as possible. That tub, if you're wondering, was about 7 liters of mineral oil. Once it's had its 20-minute soak, I'm gonna leave it on a rack so that it can air dry overnight. Then we're gonna hit it with some J&D Creations wood goo. I'll probably leave that for 24 hours, see if it needs another coat, and then ship it off to the client. So hopefully I can get some real finish shots for you up in this end segment, maybe here, but I'm really happy with the results on this one. This is my first proper end grain board that I've made. It did have its challenges, but that means the next one is just gonna be even bigger and even better. Before I end this video though, I wanna say thank you to you for checking out this video, sticking around with me for the build, and just all in all for supporting my content. YouTube recently told me that 87% of the people who watch my videos are not subscribed. So if that's you, press that subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on these projects. If you made it through the entire video and you're still here at this point, you are my favorite person. I want you to leave me a comment down below that begins with Brickwork. Any comments that start with Brickwork, I will be sure to respond to those ones first. Now I hope you guys enjoyed this project. If you did, I've got another one teed up for you right here that I know you're gonna love. And just down here is something YouTube thinks you're gonna love. So before you put your phone down to cook dinner or go walk the dog, just check one of them out first. Stay safe and I will see you later. Oh, but before you turn the internet off, why not head on over, check out my website, see if there's anything there that you want to get for your loved ones for Christmas. I've got a stack of stuff over there, so go and check it out. There's a link in the description below. See you next time.